I always thought my life with Emily was a quiet masterpiece, painted in soft hues of routine and trust. We'd been married for 12 years, living in a modest brick house on the edge of Portland, where the rain tapped our windows like a metronome to our days. I'm James, a structural engineer, the kind of man who finds comfort in blueprints and the certainty of steel beams. Emily was a freelance illustrator, her hands always smudged with charcoal, her laughter a melody that filled our home. We weren't perfect. Money was tight sometimes, and we argued about silly things like whose turn it was to unload the dishwasher. But I believed in us. I believed in her. It started with the smallest crack, the kind you don't notice until the whole foundation shifts. She'd been distant for weeks, her eyes drifting to her phone more than to me. I'd ask about her day, and she'd murmur something vague, her fingers tapping out messages she wouldn't share. Client stuff, she'd say, smiling that half-smile I used to adore. I didn't push. I trusted her. That was my first mistake. One evening, I came home early from a site inspection. The house was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that hums with secrets. Her sketchbook was open on the kitchen table, pages spilling with drawings I didn't recognize. Angular faces, sharp lines, nothing like her usual whimsical style. And then I saw it. A note tucked between the pages, written in her looping scrawl. Meet me tomorrow. Same place. Bring the red scarf. My stomach twisted. I didn't know what it meant, but it wasn't for me. I waited until she was asleep that night, her breathing soft and even beside me. I slipped out of bed and checked her phone. Something I'd never done before. The passcode was still our anniversary, 0412, a detail that stung as I typed it. There were messages, dozens of them, from someone named T. No full name, just an initial. Can't stop thinking about you. Last time was incredible. He'll never know. My hands shook as I scrolled, the words carving into me like a dull blade. She'd been meeting someone. She'd been lying. And I had no idea who T was. The next morning, I played my part, kissed her forehead, said I'd be late at work. She nodded, distracted, already reaching for her scarf, the red one. I left, but I didn't go far. I parked 2 streets over, watching as she slipped out the door, her steps quick and purposeful. I followed her, my truck rumbling softly behind her silver hatchback, my heart pounding in my chest. She drove to a cafe downtown, a place we'd never been together. I stayed back, watching through the window as she sat down across from him. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a jawline that could have been chiseled from stone. Tom Hardy. Yes, the Tom Hardy, the actor, sitting there, laughing with my wife. Couldn't breathe. The air in my truck felt thick, suffocating. As I stared through the cafe window, Tom Hardy, movie star, brooding icon, the man whose films I'd watched with Emily on lazy Sunday nights, was leaning across the table, his hand brushing hers. She laughed, her head tilting the way it used to when I tell her a bad joke. My mind spun, grasping for logic. Was this a client meeting? A coincidence? But then he reached for her scarf, the red one, and draped it over her shoulders like it was his to touch. She didn't pull away. She leaned closer. I'd always known Emily admired him. She'd gush about his roles, Bane, Mad Max, that gangster flick she'd watched 3 times. He's just so intense, she'd say, her eyes bright. I'd tease her, call him her celebrity crush, and she'd swat my arm, giggling. It was harmless, I thought, a fantasy. But now, here he was, flesh and blood, in Portland of all places, and my wife was glowing under his gaze. I didn't storm in, couldn't. My legs felt like concrete, my thoughts a chaotic mess. How had this happened? When? I remembered she'd gone to a convention in Seattle last month, some art and film event. She'd come back buzzing, talking about panels and networking, but she'd never mentioned him. Had they met there? Had she planned this? I watched as they stood, leaving cash on the table, and walked out together. He slung an arm around her waist, casual, possessive. She didn't flinch. They crossed the street to a boutique hotel, its neon sign flickering in the drizzle. I followed at a distance, parking where I could see the entrance. They disappeared inside, and I waited. Minutes turned to hours. My phone buzzed, her text, "Working late on a project. Don't wait up." I stared at it, the lie burning my eyes. When they emerged, it was dusk. Her hair was mussed, his shirt untucked. They kissed, brief but deliberate, before he climbed into a black SUV and she drove off in her car. I went home, numb. She was already there when I walked in, sketching at the table like nothing had happened. "Hey, Han," she said, barely looking up. "How was your day?" I mumbled something about deadlines and went to the garage, where I keep my tools. I sat there, staring at the wrenches and hammers, my mind racing. She'd betrayed me. Not just with anyone, but with a man whose face was plastered on billboards. A man I could never compete with. And she thought I'd never know. That night I didn't sleep. I lay beside her, listening to her breathe, plotting. I wouldn't confront her yet. I needed proof, a plan. Revenge wasn't a word I'd ever used before, but it settled into me now, cold and sharp. She'd chosen him, chosen this, and I'd make her regret it. Not with shouting or tears. I'm not that man. My revenge would be precise, structural, like the buildings I design. Unbreakable. The next few days, I became a ghost in my own life. I went to work, nodded at her stories, ate the dinners she cooked, but inside, I was dismantling everything I thought I knew about us. I started digging. Her phone was a treasure trove, but I needed more. I installed a tracking app on it while she showered, syncing it to my laptop. She didn't notice. She was too busy texting T, planning their next meeting. Thursday. The cabin. Can't wait. The cabin. Our cabin. A little retreat an hour outside Portland we'd bought 5 years ago for quiet weekends. My stomach churned. She was taking him there. I checked her sketchbook again when she was out. The drawings were of him, his eyes, his hands, the curve of his smirk. Pages and pages, obsessive, intimate. I found receipts too, tucked in a drawer, hotel charges, a dinner for two at a place I'd never been. She'd used our joint account, my money, to fund this. The audacity of it fueled me. I started watching her more closely. How she'd linger in the bathroom, primping in ways she hadn't for me in years. The red scarf became her signature, a signal I now understood. Thursday came. She told me she was visiting her sister in Salem. A lie so smooth I might have believed it once. I let her go, then followed. The drive to the cabin was familiar, the winding roads lined with pines, but this time it felt like a descent. I parked a mile out, hiking the rest, my boots silent on the damp earth. The cabin's lights were on when I arrived, her car in the drive beside a rental SUV. I crept closer, peering through the window. They were there, on the couch we'd picked out together. She was curled against him, his arm around her, a bottle of wine, our wine on the table. They laughed, her voice bright and unguarded, a sound I hadn't heard in months. Then she stood, pulling him toward the bedroom. Our bedroom. The door closed, and I stayed outside, the cold seeping into my bones. I didn't need to see more. I had enough. I drove back home, my mind a storm of calculations. Revenge wasn't just about hurting her. It was about dismantling what she'd built with him, exposing it, making it collapse under its own weight. I started researching Tom Hardy. He was filming in the Northwest some gritty indie project. Married, 2 kids, a public image of quiet charm. Emily wasn't his first fling, I'd bet. I needed leverage, something to twist this back on them both. By dawn, I had a plan. It was cruel, yes, but so was she. So was he. I'd use what I knew, her art, his fame, our cabin, and turn it into a wrecking ball. She'd never see it coming. I spent the next day preparing, my hands steady despite the fire in my chest. Emily came home that afternoon, humming, her cheeks flushed with a glow I hadn't given her. "How was Salem?" I asked, my voice calm, practiced. "Oh, fine," she said, brushing past me to the kitchen. "Sis says hi." I nodded, watching her unpack a bag of groceries she hadn't bought. Props for her story, I guessed. She didn't know I'd been at the cabin, that I'd seen the wine stains on the rug, the rumpled sheets. I kept that to myself, a card unplayed. My first move was subtle. I called a friend, Mark, who works in tech. "Need a favor," I said. Can you trace a phone number? Discreetly. He didn't ask why, just took the number I'd pulled from her messages to T and promised results. By evening, he had it. A burner phone, unlisted, but pinging from Portland and Seattle over the past month. Tom Hardy was careful, but not careful enough. I thanked Mark and moved to phase 2. Emily's art was her soul, her pride. She'd been working on a new series, something personal, she'd said, refusing to show me. I knew now it was him, those sketches, that obsession. I waited until she left for a meeting, another lie, then photographed every page of her sketchbook. Dozens of portraits, some tender, some raw, all of him. I uploaded them to my laptop, encrypted the files, and started editing. Not to destroy them, but to amplify them, adding dates, locations, little details from her texts. A story in pictures. I knew she'd submit this series somewhere, probably that gallery downtown she'd been eyeing. I'd make sure it got there, but not the way she planned. I contacted the gallery owner, posing as an anonymous tipster. Emily Carter's got something big coming, I said. Keep an eye out. He sounded intrigued. Good. Let her think she was on the cusp of a breakthrough. Let him think he was her muse. They'd both fall harder when it crumbled. That night, she came home late again, smelling faintly of cedar and cologne. I didn't ask. I just watched her, memorizing the lies in her movements. She kissed my cheek, said she was tired, and went to bed. I stayed up, refining my plan. Tom Hardy's life was next, his marriage, his career. I couldn't touch him directly, not yet, but I could plant seeds. I created an anonymous email and sent a vague message to a tabloid tip line. Big star spotted in Portland. Cozy with a local. Wife won't be happy. No names, no proof, just enough to stir curiosity. I wasn't done. The cabin was mine too, legally, emotionally. I drove there the next morning, letting her think I was at work. I installed a small camera in the living room, hidden in a bookshelf, motion activated. If they went back, I'd have it all. Every laugh, every touch. Evidence wasn't just for me. It was for the endgame. I cleaned up after myself, leaving no trace, and drove home with a strange calm settling over me. This wasn't rage anymore. It was purpose. A week passed, a slow burn of waiting and watching. Emily grew bolder, her excuses flimsier. Late night with a collaborator, she'd say, or running errands. When her car's GPS told me she'd been at the hotel again, the camera at the cabin caught them twice more. Lazy afternoons, her sketching while he lounged. Their ease mocking me. I saved every frame, building my archive. She thought she was untouchable, that I was too dull, too trusting to suspect. She was wrong. Tom Hardy's name started popping up online, whispers, nothing concrete. My tabloid seed had taken root. Mystery woman in Portland. One blog speculated. Trouble in paradise? Another hinted. His PR team would squash it soon, I knew, but the doubt was there, festering. Emily didn't notice. She was too wrapped up in her bubble, planning her next escape. I might head to the cabin this weekend, she said Friday morning, casual as if it were nothing. Need some quiet to draw. I smiled, told her to enjoy. She didn't see the edge in my eyes. I let her go, then followed again. This time, I didn't stay outside. I waited until they were inside, until the camera pinged my phone with their arrival. I hiked up, silent, and slipped a tracker under his rental SUV. Small, untraceable, a gift from Mark. I needed to know his movements, not just hers. Back home, I watched the feed. They were cooking together, her laughing as he chopped vegetables. A scene so domestic it twisted something deep in me. Our kitchen used to be like that. That night, I finalized the gallery piece. I'd taken her sketches, paired them with stills from the cabin footage, blurred just enough to keep it legal, sharp enough to be unmistakable. I wrote a statement, her voice, a study in intimacy, inspired by a fleeting connection. I'd submit it under her name, let the gallery unveil it as her triumph. Critics would rave, fans would speculate, and Tom Hardy's face, her muse, would be everywhere. His wife would see. His world would tilt. Sunday, she came home, radiant. Got so much done, she said, kissing me like it meant something. I nodded, asked about her drawings. She hesitated, then showed me a few safe ones, not him. I praised them, my voice steady. Inside, I was counting down. The gallery email came Monday. "We'd love to feature your series. Send it over." I did, from her account while she slept. The trap was set. Revenge wasn't loud, it was a slow, deliberate collapse, and I was the engineer. The gallery submission was the first beam in my structure of revenge, and I felt its weight settle into place. Emily didn't know yet, didn't suspect that her art, her secret, was now a loaded weapon in my hands. She hummed through her days, sketching more, texting T, when she thought I wasn't looking. I let her believe she was safe, that her double life was a perfect little fortress. Meanwhile, I tracked Tom Hardy's SUV. Its blinking dead on my screen, a constant reminder of her betrayal. He moved between Portland and a film set an hour north, but always returned to her, to our cabin, to my life. I started Phase 3, exposure. The gallery show was set for next month, but I couldn't wait that long to tighten the screws. I dug deeper into Tom Hardy's world. Not just his marriage, but his image. He'd built a career on being the quiet, rugged everyman. A devoted husband in interviews. A father who shunned the Hollywood glare. Emily wasn't his first slip, I was sure of it. I scoured online forums, old gossip threads, piecing together rumors of past flings hushed up by his team. I didn't need proof for this part, just noise. I sent another anonymous tip, this time to a bigger outlet. Tom Hardy's cozying up with an artist in Portland. Check the cabin near Mount Hood. Vague, tantalizing, enough to send a paparazzo sniffing. At home, I kept up the charade. "You seem happy lately," I told her one night, stirring pasta as she sketched at the table. She looked up, startled, then smiled. "Yeah, I guess I am. Work's good." I nodded, swallowing the bile in my throat. Her happiness was a borrowed thing, stolen from me, and I'd make sure it cost her. The tracker showed him at the cabin again that weekend. She'd gone alone, she said, but the camera told the truth. They danced in the living room, her head on his chest, the red scarf trailing behind her like a flag of surrender. I saved the footage, added it to my growing arsenal. Monday brought the first ripple. A small blog posted blurry photos. Tom Hardy's SUV outside our cabin. A shadowed figure that could have been her. "Who's the mystery woman?" the caption read. Emily didn't see it. She wasn't the type to trawl gossip sites, but I knew his people would. I watched her that night, waiting for a crack. Nothing yet. She kissed me goodnight, oblivious, and I lay awake, plotting the next move. The gallery show would be the centerpiece, but I needed to weaken her foundation first, make her feel the ground shift. I called in sick the next day and drove to the cabin. I didn't go inside this time, just sat in my truck, staring at the place we'd once dreamed of retiring to. It was tainted now, every memory overwritten by them. I pulled out my phone and emailed a local printer, attaching a few of her sketches, the tame ones, not the gallery set. "Poster job," I wrote. "Rush order." I'd plaster them around town. And signed, "Untraceable," a teaser for what was coming. Let her wonder. Let him squirm. Revenge wasn't a single blow. It was a series of cracks, spreading until the whole thing collapsed. The posters went up Thursday night. I drove around Portland after dark, stapling them to telephone poles, taping them to bus stops. Her sketches of his eyes, his hands, stark and haunting under streetlights. No names, no context, just her art staring back at the city. I wore gloves, a hoodie, kept my head down. By morning, they were everywhere, a silent invasion. I watched her over breakfast, waiting for a sign she'd noticed. She scrolled her phone, sipped coffee, said nothing. Maybe no one had linked it to her yet. That was fine. The seed was planted. Work kept me busy, but my mind was on the tracker. His SUV was back in town, parked near the hotel. I checked the cabin feed, empty. They were meeting elsewhere now, adapting. I smiled to myself. It didn't matter. The net was tightening. That afternoon, Mark called. "Got something," he said. "That burner number? Has been texting another line. Not your wife's. Looks like a handler or assistant. Tom Hardy's team probably managing his mess. I thanked Mark, filed it away. Another lever to pull later. Emily came home late, flustered. Weird day, she muttered, dropping her bag. Someone saw my drawings downtown, asked if they were mine. I raised an eyebrow, feigning surprise. Really? That's cool. Where'd they see them? She shrugged, vague, but I saw the unease in her eyes. Just around. I don't know. I let it drop, savoring her confusion. The posters were working, small tremors before the quake. Online, the gossip grew louder. A tabloid ran the SUV photo, speculating about Tom Hardy's secret getaway. His PR team issued a denial. He's focused on filming. But the comments buzzed with doubt. I upped the ante. Using a burner of my own, I texted his assistant's number, a guess from Mark's data. Tell Tom the artist's husband knows. Time's up. I hit send, tossed the phone in a drawer, let them scramble. That night, Emily was quiet, picking at her food. You okay? I asked, all concern. She nodded, but her hands trembled slightly. Just tired, she said. I didn't push. She was starting to feel it, the weight of something she couldn't name. I slept soundly for the first time in weeks, dreaming of blueprints and falling beams. Friday, the gallery called her. I heard her side of it from the hall, excited, breathless. Next week? That's amazing. Yes, I'll bring everything. She hung up, beaming. They're moving the show up, she told me. They love my series. I grinned, genuine for once. That's incredible, Em. I'm proud of you. She hugged me, and I held her, knowing what she didn't. Her triumph was mine now. The posters, the rumors, the text, they were all scaffolding, holding up the real collapse. The weekend was a strange dance of normalcy and tension. Emily prepped for the show, sorting sketches, framing pieces. None of the ones I'd sent, of course. Those were my secret, locked in a digital vault. She chattered about the gallery, the exposure, how it could change everything. I nodded, helped her pack, played the supportive husband. Inside, I was counting hours. The tracker showed Tom Hardy back at the set, but his assistant's number had gone silent after my text. Good. They were rattled. Sunday night, I drove downtown, scouting the gallery. It was a sleek space, glass-fronted, perfect for what was coming. I'd added a twist to the submission. A short video, compiled from the cabin footage, edited with her sketches overlaid. No faces, just shadows. Her voice laughing from the audio, his low murmur in the background. An experimental piece. I'd called it in the email sent from her account. The curator had loved it, said it elevated the narrative. Emily would walk in blind, expecting praise, and find her world exposed. Monday, the rumors hit a new pitch. A major outlet picked up the story. Tom Hardy's Portland fling, married artist involved? No names yet, but photos of the posters circulated. Her style unmistakable to anyone who knew her work. She saw it that morning. I caught her staring at her phone, pale. What's wrong? I asked casual. Nothing, she lied, shoving the phone away. Just weird stuff online. I didn't press. Let her stew. She left for a meeting, but the tracker showed her at the hotel. She was running to him, scared. I smiled, sipping my coffee. That afternoon, I visited a lawyer friend, off the books. Hypothetical divorce, I said. What's the play if there's infidelity? He walked me through it, Oregon's no-fault laws, but proof could sway asset splits, hurt her credibility if it went public. I nodded, thanked him. The cabin was joint property. She'd fight for it. I'd make sure she lost more than that. Back home, I printed stills from the video, her scarf, his silhouette, tucked them in an envelope. Not for the lawyer, for her. She came home late, eyes red. Rough day? I asked. She nodded, mumbled about stress. Went to bed. I stayed up, finalizing details. The show was tomorrow. The posters had done their job. Half the city was whispering, and Tom Hardy's team was in damage control. My text had pushed them to react, but they couldn't stop what was already rolling. I slept with the envelope under my pillow, a quiet promise. Tuesday dawned gray, the sky a fitting shroud for what I'd built. Emily was up early, buzzing with nerves, packing her portfolio for the gallery. "Wish me luck," she said, kissing me quick. "You'll be great," I replied, meaning it in my own way. I didn't go to work, called in sick again, drove downtown instead, parking a block from the gallery. I wanted to see it unfold, not from the front row, but from the shadows. The show started at 6, open to the public, critics, her artist friends. She'd invited me, but I'd begged off, citing a deadline. She didn't push. I watched from my truck as people trickled in, hipsters in scarves, suits with wine glasses, a few photographers. The posters had drawn a crowd. Whispers of Tom Hardy floated on the air. At 6:15, I slipped closer, peering through the glass. Emily stood near the center, radiant in a black dress, chatting with the curator. Her sketches lined the walls, mine, not hers, the ones I'd sent. The video played on a loop at the back, shadows flickering, her laugh echoing. I saw her freeze when she noticed, her smile faltering. The room shifted. People pointed, murmured. Phones came out. She approached the curator, gesturing wildly. I couldn't hear, but her panic was clear. Then the stills hit. Someone opened my envelope, left anonymously at the door, and passed them around. Her scarf, his outline undeniable. A woman gasped. A man laughed. Emily's face went white, her hands clutching her dress. The curator pulled her aside, but it was too late. The crowd was buzzing, cameras flashing. I stepped back, my pulse steady. Online, it exploded. Tom Hardy's mistress unveiled at art show. One headline screamed, her name attached. Photos of the sketches, the video, the stills, everywhere within an hour. I drove home, letting it sink in. She'd wanted exposure. I'd given it to her. Tom Hardy's team would deny, deflect, but the damage was done. His wife would see. His kids, her friends, our neighbors. I waited calm, for her to come home. She stumbled in at midnight, sobbing. "James, she started, but I cut her off. "I know," I said, voice flat. "I've known for weeks." She stared, mouth open, tears streaming. "How could you?" she whispered. Not about him, but the show. I didn't answer, just handed her the divorce papers I drafted that morning. "Sign them," I said. "We're done." She sank to the floor, wrecked, and I walked away, leaving her in the ruin I'd engineered. The fallout was swift, a storm I'd designed to perfection. By morning, Emily's name was trending, her art a scandal instead of a triumph. Critics called it raw and provocative, but the public saw only the affair. Her with Tom Hardy, a married man, splashed across every gossip site. His team issued a statement, "Baseless rumors. Tom remains committed to his family." It didn't matter. The photos, the video, her sketches, they were too real, too specific. Doubt clung to him like damp rot. She didn't leave the house that day. I heard her pacing upstairs, her phone ringing nonstop. Friends probably, or reporters. I stayed in the garage, sorting tools, my sanctuary. The tracker showed his SUV leaving Portland, heading north. Fleeing, I hoped. Good riddance. I'd kept the cabin footage private. A final card I hadn't played. If he pushed back, I'd leak it crystal clear, no shadows this time. Let his lawyers scramble then. Emily came down at noon, hollow-eyed. "Why?" she asked, voice cracked. "Why destroy me like this?" I looked at her, the woman I'd loved, and felt nothing but cold steel. "You destroyed us," I said. "You chose him. I just made it public." She flinched, wrapping her arms around herself. "I didn't mean," she started, but I walked past her, done listening. She'd meant every touch, every lie. I'd seen it. The lawyer called, papers were filed, assets to be split. "She'll fight for the cabin," he warned. I nodded, expected it. Let her try. I'd sell it first, burn it if I had to. That night, she packed a bag, left for her sister's, her real sister this time, I assumed. The house was mine again, quiet, empty. I sat at the kitchen table, her sketchbook still there, and flipped through it one last time. His face stared back, a ghost I'd banished. I tore the pages out, fed them to the fireplace, watched them curl and blacken. Revenge wasn't joy, it was closure. She'd lost her career, her pride, her lover. He'd lost his clean image, his peace. I'd lost her, but I'd gained something harder, sharper. The structure held. I slept alone, the embers dying, and felt the weight lift, just a little. The days after Emily left were a strange limbo. The house too big, too silent without her. I didn't miss her. Not the her she'd become, but I missed the rhythm we'd had, the illusion of us. Her absence was a victory, though, a clean cut where rot had been. Online, the storm raged on. Her name was a punching bag for trolls. Her art mocked as the mistress's portfolio. Tom Hardy's team doubled down, threatening legal action against defamatory claims. But the photos and video lingered, shared and reshared, a stain they couldn't scrub. I went back to work, slipping into the familiar grind of blueprints and site checks. Colleagues asked about her. Word had spread. Portland's a small city, but I shrugged it off. We're done, I'd say, and they'd nod, awkward, leaving it there. Mark called once, curious. Heard about the gallery, he said. That you? I didn't confirm, just thanked him for the tech help. He laughed, didn't push. Good man. Emily's lawyer reached out Thursday, a curt email about mediation. She wanted the cabin, half the savings, spousal support. I laughed, a dry, bitter sound. She'd funded her affair with my money, and now she wanted more? I told my lawyer to fight it. Every penny, every plank of that cabin. I'd sell it first, I decided. Taint it beyond her reach. That night, I checked the tracker. Tom Hardy's SUV was in Seattle now, probably back with his wife, playing the penitent husband. I wondered if she believed him. The cabin idea grew roots. I drove there Friday, the familiar road now a battleground. Inside, it smelled of them, her lavender lotion, his cologne, a mix that turned my stomach. I found traces. A wine cork, a sock under the couch, her scarf, the red one, draped over a chair. I bagged it all, evidence for later, then started planning. Selling wasn't enough. I wanted it gone, a monument to their ruin. I called a realtor friend off the record. Hypothetical, I said. How do you tank a property's value? He chuckled, listed options. Neglect, rumors, structural flaws. I filed it away, gears turning. Saturday, I leaked more, the full cabin footage, unedited, to a sleazy tabloid. Faces clear, voices unmistakable. Anonymous source, I tagged it, using a VPN Mark had set up. By Sunday, it was everywhere. Tom Hardy's affair caught on tape. Emily's laugh, his low growl, their casual intimacy. All public now. His PR team went silent. Her phone, I'm sure, blew up. I didn't care. The cabin's address slipped out in the frenzy. Oops. Let the gawkers come, let the value plummet. She'd never get it now. The cabin became a circus within days. Paparazzi camped out. Fans too, snapping photos of the love nest. A local news van parked nearby, filming B-roll for some tawdry segment. I drove by once, keeping my distance, and saw the chaos. Muddy tire tracks, trampled grass, graffiti on the mailbox, cheater's hideaway in red spray paint. Perfect. The realtor called, alarmed. You still selling? Price is dropping fast. I told him to wait, let it sink lower. Emily's lawyer would scream, but she'd signed the deed with me. My move. She texted me Monday, first time since she left. You're ruining everything. Stop this. I didn't reply. She'd ruined us. I was just the cleanup crew. Online, her art career imploded. Galleries dropped her. Clients ghosted. A few diehards praised the authenticity of her scandal, but most saw a punchline. Tom Hardy's wife filed for separation. Tabloids said, citing irreconcilable differences. His next film lost funding. Whispers of toxic baggage. I didn't gloat. I just watched, a builder inspecting his work. Tuesday, I met my lawyer. She's pushing for mediation, he said. Wants to settle quiet. I shook my head. No deals. She gets nothing. He warned me. Courts might sympathize with her, paint me as vindictive. Let them try. I had receipts, footage, proof of her lies. She'd leave with less than she brought in. That night, I listed the cabin online, dirt cheap, as is. Bids trickled in, flippers mostly smelling a bargain. I picked one, a cash offer, closing in a week. Emily would find out too late. Wednesday, I cleaned house, literally. Her stuff was still here, cluttering corners. I boxed it, drove to her sister's, dumped it on the porch. No note. She'd know. Back home, I scrubbed every surface, erasing her scent, her smudges. The fireplace got her last sketches, the ones she'd hidden. Flames ate them slow, and I felt lighter. The tracker pinged, his SUV in LA now. Running farther. Good. Thursday, a package arrived. Her scarf, mailed back from the cabin buyer. A cruel little souvenir. I smiled, tucked it away. Revenge wasn't over. It was a slow burn, and I had one last spark to light. The cabin sale closed Friday, a fraction of its worth. Emily's lawyer called, furious, but it was done. My name on the deed gave me rights, and I'd acted fast. She'd get half the pittance minus fees, a slap in the face after her demands. I wired the money to my account, let her fight for scraps. The new owner texted, "Place is a mess. Weird vibes." I didn't reply, let him deal with the ghosts. Online, the story shifted. Emily as the villain now, the homewrecker who'd chased a star. Sympathy swung to Tom Hardy's wife, a quiet woman blindsided by it all. I didn't care who won the narrative. I'd won the war. She called that night, voice raw. "James, please. I'm sorry. Let's talk." I hung up. Sorry didn't rebuild trust, didn't erase her laughing with him in our bed. I blocked her number, a final wall. Saturday, I took her scarf to a tailor, a quiet guy I knew from work. "Make it into something," I said, vague. He nodded, no questions. I had an idea, a last twist of the knife. Meanwhile, I sorted the divorce. Mediation was off, court date set. My lawyer had the footage, the receipts, ready to bury her. She'd walk away with nothing but shame, and I'd keep the house, the savings, my dignity. Sunday, I met Mark for beers. "You're a cold bastard," he said, half admiring. "She deserved it," I replied, sipping. He didn't argue. The tabloids had new dirt. Tom Hardy in rehab. Stress-related. They claimed. His career teetered, hers was ash. I slept easy, dreaming of steel beams. Unyielding. Monday, the tailor called, scarf was ready. I picked it up. A small pillow, red and soft, stitched tight. Perfect. Tuesday, I mailed it to her sister's address, no return label. Let her open it. Feel the weight of her signal, her betrayal, turned into something mundane. A keepsake of her ruin. The tracker was dead now, his SUV off the grid. He'd faded, and I was done hunting. The court date loomed, a month out, but I was ready. My lawyer built a fortress, bank statements showing her spending, the cabin footage, even her texts to T. She had no defense, just pleas for mercy. I didn't bend. She'd chosen this every step. Meanwhile, I redecorated, new paint, new furniture, her traces gone. The house was mine, a clean slate. Work picked up. I took a promotion, longer hours, a distraction from the echoes. Online, she tried a comeback, posted an apology, some tearful video about growth and mistakes. It flopped. Comments tore her apart. Too late. Where's Tom now? He was MIA, rumored to be overseas, hiding. His wife's lawyer was bleeding him dry, tabloids said. I didn't follow it close, just skimmed, satisfied. The scarf pillow I heard through a mutual friend had undone her. She'd screamed when she saw it, threw it out. I smiled, imagining it. Friday, I got a call, her sister. "She's a mess, James. Can't you stop?" I stayed calm. "She stopped us. I finished it." She sighed, hung up. No guilt here. Emily had built her cage. I just locked the door. That night, I cooked steak, ate alone, savored the quiet. The cabin money came through, pitiful but mine. I banked it, a nest egg for whatever came next. Saturday, I hiked Mount Hood, near where the cabin stood. It was someone else's problem now, a shadow I'd shed. The air was crisp, cleansing. I felt strong, rebuilt. Revenge had hollowed me out, but it left room for something new, control, maybe, or peace. Sunday, I started a project. A shed in the backyard, all steel and wood, my hands busy. No more ghosts. Monday, a coworker mentioned her. Heard she'd moved. Some artist commune up north. Good riddance. I nodded, changed the subject. She was gone, he was broken, and I stood tall. The court day arrived, a gray Thursday in April. Emily showed up, thin, eyes sunken, her lawyer whispering in her ear. She wouldn't look at me. The judge heard it all, my evidence, her weak rebuttals. Emotional distress, her lawyer claimed, blaming me for the gallery, the leaks. I stared ahead, unmoved. The footage played, silent but damning, her laugh filling the room. The judge ruled fast. No support, assets split pre-scandal, cabin proceeds mine. She got nothing but her clothes, her shame. She tried to speak after, outside the courthouse. James, I walked past, didn't break stride. Her voice faded, a memory I didn't need. Driving home, I felt it, finality. The structure was complete, every beam in place, no cracks left to mend. Online, she vanished, deleted her accounts, fled the noise. Tom Hardy resurfaced in a low-budget flick, a shadow of himself. His wife took the kids, the house. I didn't care. They were footnotes. Friday, I finished the shed, sleek, sturdy, a testament to what I could build alone. Friends came over, toasted the divorce, my new start. I smiled, meant it. The house was alive again, mine in a way it hadn't been with her. Saturday, I found an old photo of us, pre-betrayal, tucked in a drawer. I burned it, no ceremony, just ash. Sunday, I planned a trip, Alaska, maybe somewhere cold and vast. A reset. Monday, a letter came, her handwriting shaky. I'm sorry. I was lost. Forgive me? I read it once, tore it up. Forgiveness wasn't mine to give. She'd lost that right. I tossed the scraps, locked the door, moved on. Revenge was done, not with noise or chaos, but with precision. A collapse she'd never recover from. A foundation I'd rebuilt stronger. I was free.